You know what I love? Joints. I'm not talking about the cigarettes that make you feel funny. I'm talking about the things that are responsible for skeletal movement. You're probably asking yourself, how do joints work? That's a good question. So joints need muscles to work. So I guess you have to ask, well, how do muscles work? The way I like to think about muscles is kind of like a rope, and how the only way you can get a rope to work is if you pull a rope. You can't get things to move if you push a rope. You gotta, Now, if only we had a model to demonstrate how a muscle worked. Look what I made. So, this is a very crude representation of an elbow joint. Now, if your elbow actually looks like this, you should probably see a doctor. So this is a hinge joint that just moves like up and down like this, like you guessed it, a hinge. We can just arbitrarily call this an elbow, I guess, which would make this the humerus, and this would be just the forearm, radius and ulna kind of fused together. And this yellow thread will be the muscle. So whenever the muscle is acting, it is pulling, and so the only way this muscle can work is if it pulls like this. So when the muscle is acting, it's pulling, it is flexing the joint, making the angle of the joint smaller. Whenever it relaxes, the joint extends. Now, you're probably thinking, okay, hinge joints, they're pretty easy. Not much going on. They only move one plane of motion. They're not that special. You probably want something better. The Mac Daddy of all joints. The ball and socket joint. Well, I have something for you. Look at this bad boy right here in your shoulder. Look at all that range of motion. It can go up, down, left, right. It can rotate. It can do whatever you want it to do. Now, if this joint is so great, why isn't every joint like this? You're probably wondering. Well, there's a catch to this joint as well. While it has a lot of mobility and range of motion in a ball and socket joint, what it lacks is stability and strength. So to make up with this, the shoulder joint specifically has a set of muscles, or a group of muscles, called the rotator cuff muscles. So the rotator cuff muscles are comprised of 4 individual muscles. And these muscles are the supraspinatus muscle, the infraspinatus muscle, teres minor, and the subscapularis muscle. Now, if only there was some way for you to visualize all these muscles. I got you covered. Here's a model I built to demonstrate how the rotator cuff muscles act on the shoulder joint. So this is going to be our shoulder apparatus, as you may call it. This is interesting because each of the muscles is represented by a different color thread. So the supraspinatus muscle is the red thread, the infraspinatus muscle is the green threads, the teres minor is the blue thread, and the subscapularis on the back is the yellow thread. To understand the rotator cuff muscles, you first have to understand where everything connects physically. So I guess we can start with the supraspinatus muscle. So the medial attachment point of the supraspinatus muscle is right here on the spinaeus process of the scapula. So this little extension of popsicle stick right here is supposed to represent the spinaeus process on the scapula. So regardless, the supraspinaeus muscle connects medially to the supraspinaeus fossa of the scapula right here, and attached laterally to the greater tubercle of the humerus, which would be right here. Next, the infraspinaeus muscle. This would attach medially to the infraspinaeus fossa of the scapula right here, and it would attach laterally to the greater tubercle of the humerus, again, just like the supraspinaeus muscle. Next, we move to the teres minor, this kind of blue cyan muscle right here. And this thing medially attaches to the lateral border of the scapula, which is this part right here. And it laterally attaches to, the greater tubercle of the humerus. And lastly, this is the subscapularis again, this yellow muscle. Medially, it attaches to the subscapular fossa, and laterally, it attaches to the lesser tubercle of the humerus, right here. What do all these muscles do? What are their function? You're probably dying to know. I mean, I would be too. So, what is pretty useful about this model is that, since we learned earlier that muscles work by pulling, what we can do is pull on each one of these threads to determine how it would affect the shoulder joint. Thread isn't as stretchy as muscle, so there's not much range of motion. So let's start off with the supraspinatus muscle. this red thread that runs across right here. So what would happen if this contracts? It would abduct the shoulder joint the first about 15 to 30 degrees of motion, kind of from here to here-ish. So if we pull on this, it is struggling to move, struggling to abduct, but it's getting there. Next we can move to the infraspinatus muscle, which is this green one right here. And the function of this muscle is internal rotation of the shoulder. So we go from here to here, and that should be reflected hopefully in this model. So whenever we pull on this green thread over here, we can see that the shoulder joint rotates. Next we can do the teres minor, which is this blue thread right here. And the function of this muscle is both external rotation of the shoulder, which should be from here to here, as well as abduction of the shoulder, which should be from here to here. So basically, this muscle is crucial anytime you're going to the YMCA. So whenever we pull on the teres minor in this model, you can see lastly we have the subscapularis, and this muscle is responsible for both the internal rotation of the shoulder, which would be this movement from here to here, as well as adduction of the shoulder. So from here to here. You can see a little bit better on this model that whenever we pull it, the muscle is going from here to here, which is, that's adduction right there. And it, a little bit of internal rotation right there. While this model isn't the best for showing movement, it does have other things it does really well. One function is that it's the face of my sleep paralysis demon at this point. And another function is that it shows the directions of the striations of the muscle really well. Starting off with the supraspinatus muscle again. So you can see the striations running with the red thread. So basically, every single thread would be a striation of the muscle. So we can see the muscle fibers or the striations running with the direction of the muscle, going from here all the way down here. And it works well for every single muscle in the model. So for the infraspinatus muscle, the green one, the muscle fibers run from here to here. These are the striations of the muscle. Again, with the teres minor, we can see the striations of the muscle running from here to here. The light blue muscle, you can see the muscle fibers, striations running there. Lastly, the subscapularis, we can see the striations or the threads of the muscle running from here to here. So, key takeaways. Muscles, they always pull, they never push. So predicting the muscle action, just try to imagine what the muscle would do if it was pulling itself, kind of contracting itself, getting shorter. That would be the muscle action. There are 4 muscles in the rotator cuff muscle group that all help stabilize and strengthen the muscle joint. And don't spend your money on a mannequin head, because its lifeless eyes will haunt you for weeks to come.